If this love story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your corner of the world. Every story becomes more meaningful when it's shared with someone. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss tomorrow's special story. It's one that just might stay with you forever. Hit that bell so we can meet here again, same time, same place. They chose each other every day. Even when memory began to fade, Walter met Helen on a chilly fall afternoon in 1964 in a small-town diner tucked away in rural Oregon. He was a young mechanic with oil-stained hands and a shy smile. She was a waitress with bright eyes and dreams that reached far beyond the pine trees. That day he ordered coffee he didn't even like, just to talk to her. What began as a brief conversation over lukewarm coffee turned into late-night walks, handwritten letters, and promises whispered under starlit skies. Within a year, they were married, two hearts choosing each other with no idea what the road ahead would hold. They started their life in a modest house, no bigger than a garage, with creaky floors and a leaky roof. But to them, it was a castle. They didn't have much, just a second-hand couch, a tiny kitchen, and a whole lot of love. Helen cooked dinner by candlelight when the power went out. Walter fixed the heater every winter, even when it gave out. More than it worked. Time passed. Babies were born. Laughter echoed through the walls. And sometimes, so did arguments. Life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Through job losses, financial struggles, and nights spent in silence after disagreements, they chose to stay. They chose patience, kindness, and forgiveness, even when it was hard. Walter worked long hours at the shop. Helen raised the kids and kept the house running. On weekends, they'd drive into town, holding hands like teenagers, buying vanilla, milkshakes, and sitting quietly at the same diner where it all began. The waitresses changed, but the booth didn't. Neither did they. Now 60 years later, their hair is silver, their steps are slower, and their hands tremble. But they still hold on to each other, just like they did in 1964. Every morning, Walter brews the coffee. Still doesn't like it much, but he makes it for her. Helen folds his laundry, tucking dryer sheets in with a kiss on the cheek. They don't need fancy vacations or big declarations. Their love is in the little things, the blanket he tucks around her legs during chilly nights, the way she hums while brushing his hair. 60 years and the spark hasn't gone out. It's quieter now, steadier, like a candle that refuses to burn out. When asked what the secret is, Walter simply says, "You just don't stop choosing each other." And maybe that's the heart of it all. A lifetime love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about the choice made day after day to stay, to grow, to hold on, even when the coffee's cold. Walter and Helen's love story didn't stay frozen in that cozy little diner or the honeymoon days of their tiny starter home. Life, as it always does, came in waves, some gentle, some relentless, and through every high and low, they held. On 3 years into their marriage, their first child, Emily, was born premature. Helen was rushed to the hospital in the middle of a snowstorm. Walter drove through black ice, heart pounding, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. She made it. So did Emily. But Walter never forgot how fragile it all felt, that love could be lost in a moment, stolen by something as simple as bad weather or bad luck. Money was tight in those early years. Walter worked double shifts at the auto shop, hands cracked and calloused. Helen babysat neighborhood kids just to cover the bills. Sometimes they argued about money, about exhaustion, about dreams put on hold, but they never left the table angry. No matter how hard the day had been, they always came back to each other before bed, even if it was just a tired good night and a squeeze of the hand under the covers. Then came the cancer scare. Helen found the lump just before her 50th birthday. It was the first time Walter had ever seen her cry like that, quiet tears in the dark when she thought he was asleep. He wasn't. He held her hand through every test, every chemo session. He shaved his head when her hair started falling out. And when the doctor finally said, "You're in the clear," they both wept. Out of relief, out of love, out of the quiet terror they'd been carrying for months. There were losses, too. Friends, parents, their middle son, David, who died in a car accident at 27. That nearly broke them. For weeks, Helen didn't speak. Walter didn't know how to reach her. But one morning she walked into the kitchen, poured 2 cups of coffee, set one down in front of him, and whispered, "We still have each other." It wasn't a solution, but it was a start, and it was enough. Over 60 years the world changed. Their kids grew up, moved out, started families of their own. The house got quieter, the holidays shorter. But through every chapter, every hospital room, every graveyard, every packed U-Haul, every Sunday morning spent watching the rain, they were there, together. They didn't just grow old together. They grew through life together, side by side, not because it was easy, not because everything was perfect, but because they never gave up on the promise they made back in 1964. "Whatever comes," Helen had whispered back then, "we face it together." And they did. After everything Walter and Helen had endured, Emily's birth, Helen's battle with cancer, and the tragic loss of David, you'd think nothing could shake their bond. But sometimes it's not the big storms that threaten a marriage. It's the slow erosion, the quiet drift, the weight of years pressing down without warning. In their early 70s, things began to shift. Walter had retired from the shop. Helen, too, stepped back from her community work. The house, once filled with noise and footsteps, now echoed with silence. The days grew long. The routines grew dull. There was no more running late for school. Drop-offs, no more dance recitals, no more reasons to rush. That's when the questions started creeping in, not out loud, but deep inside. Helen felt it first. That ache of invisibility. After a lifetime of giving, being mom, being wife, who was she now? She didn't say anything at first. She just got quieter. She stayed in bed longer. She forgot her book club. She stopped humming while she cooked. Walter noticed but didn't know what to do. His body was slowing down. He'd pulled something in his back and hated feeling useless. Pride kept him from talking about it. Instead, he tinkered in the garage. Fixed things that didn't need fixing. He avoided the quiet sadness growing between them. It could have gone either way. But one night, as Helen sat alone at the kitchen table, fingers circling the rim of her teacup, Walter walked in, sat across from her and said, "I miss you. I'm still right here, but I miss you." Her eyes welled up. That was the moment that changed everything, not a grand gesture, not flowers or speeches, just honesty, vulnerability. A reminder that even after decades together, loyalty wasn't about staying under the same roof. It was about staying emotionally close, choosing to see each other, choosing to show up. From then on, they made a new effort, deliberate and tender. Morning walks, even if just around the block, listening, really listening, laughing again, telling old stories, looking at old photos, calling old friends, falling in love in a quiet and sacred way all over again. They'd seen other couples grow apart in old age, marriages that became silent arrangements, lives that drifted like boats in opposite directions, but not them. Walter and Helen had made a vow, not just at the altar, but in 1,000 unspoken ways through the years, to never let go, to never become strangers. Their loyalty wasn't just about staying married. It was about showing up every day, even when it hurt, even when it was inconvenient, even when it felt easier to pull away. And when people asked them the secret to their 60-year marriage, Walter would smile and say, "We never stopped choosing each other, even when it would have been easier not to. Because real loyalty isn't loud. It's quiet. It's consistent. And it's built in the moments when love could fade but doesn't." After that late-night kitchen talk, the one where Walter told Helen, "I miss you," something shifted between them. It wasn't loud or dramatic. There wasn't some big revelation. But the silence between them softened. The distance closed. And suddenly the smallest things started to mean everything again. Each morning Helen would wake first, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She'd shuffle into the kitchen, put on the kettle, and toast exactly 1.5 slices of bread, just the way Walter liked it. She'd leave the crust on his plate because she knew he'd feed them to the birds outside. He always did. Walter, even with aching knees and a back that no longer obeyed, would rise slowly, walk to her chair, and kiss the top of her head. Not out of habit, but because somehow, the older they got, the more precious each moment felt. That was the new rhythm of their days, simple, almost quiet, but full of intention. She'd place his reading glasses by the window so he wouldn't have to search. He'd warm up her slippers in the dryer on cold mornings. She'd water his tomato plants when his joints flared. He'd brush her hair on Sundays, even when her hands could still do it just fine. They didn't call it romance. They didn't need to. It was deeper than that. It was care. The kind of care that's born only after decades of seeing someone at their best and worst, and choosing to love them anyway. One day Emily, now in her 40s, came to visit. She sat at the kitchen table watching her parents move around each other like clockwork. No tension, no wasted words, just a silent language built over years of love. She said, "You two are still so in sync. It's like second nature." Helen smiled and replied, "It's not second nature, honey, it's first choice." And that's what it was, first choice every day. They didn't have the wild, spontaneous kind of love you see in movies. No surprise vacations, no skywriting or love letters in glass bottles. But they had real love. The kind where someone folds your laundry just the way you like it, where someone waits until you're home to watch the evening news, where someone always leaves the porch light on because they know you hate coming home. In the dark, and in those everyday moments, they found magic. Their love wasn't built on one grand moment. It was a million small ones, 1,000 tiny "I see you" gestures, a lifetime of learning what made the other person feel safe, seen, and still chosen. They understood something most people missed. Love doesn't have to be loud to be lasting. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it's toast and tea and warm slippers, and sometimes, just sometimes, it's the way someone always remembers to brush your hair, even when you forget. For Walter and Helen, love never came with fireworks or fairy tale fanfare. It came with choices, quiet ones, daily ones, and now, in the softest years of their lives, those choices mattered more than ever. One morning in early autumn, Helen woke up confused. She stood in the hallway, clutching a towel, unsure whether she had just showered or was on her way to. Walter found her there, eyes searching, hands trembling. She looked at him like a stranger for a few seconds too long. It passed quickly. She laughed it off, but he didn't. That night, Walter couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the promise he made so long ago. Not in the wedding vows, but in the moments that followed. The sick days, the hard weeks, the funerals, the empty nests. Whatever comes, we face it together. The next morning, he sat beside her at breakfast and said softly, "We should probably get you checked out." Helen smiled, eyes kind. "You think I'm slipping?" Walter nodded. "Just a little, but I'm not going anywhere." That was the thing about love. It wasn't just the easy days. It was the hard ones, the scary ones, the ones where nothing was certain, except the fact that you wouldn't walk away. Helen started forgetting little things more often, where she left her keys, what day it was, whether she'd taken her pills. But Walter adapted. He made sticky notes. He labeled cabinets. He set reminders on his phone, though technology frustrated the hell out of him. Each forgotten detail was a quiet grief, but he never showed it. He just chose every single day to meet her where she was, with patience, with humor, with tenderness. And Helen, she noticed, even when her mind played tricks on her, her heart remembered. She'd reach for his hand without thinking. She'd hum the song they danced to at their wedding. Some part of her still knew, this man loves me, and he always has. People often ask them how they made it this far, 60 years, still together, still in love. Walter never gave a long answer. He'd just say, "We chose each other, every single day." Because that's what love really is. It's not a feeling you fall into. It's a decision you make. To show up, to stay, to care, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, it's wiping tears without needing answers. It's making tea before you're asked. It's choosing patience over pride, forgiveness over ego, presence over comfort. And in the quiet of their little house, with the porch light still flickering and the birds still pecking at toast crusts, Walter and Helen chose each other once again. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. Because, after everything, after all the chapters, all the cracks, all the quiet battles, their love still whispered, "I'm here. I see you, I choose you." If this story moved you even just a little, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from? And have you ever witnessed a love like Walter and Helen's in your own life? Maybe it was your grandparents and your parents. Maybe it's your own. Love that lasts isn't always loud, but it's always powerful. What part of their journey touched you the most? Was it the quiet rituals, the resilience in the face of pain, or the simple truth that love at its core is a daily choice? We read every comment, and your words matter. They remind us why stories like these need to be told. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss tomorrow's story. It's another one that just might stay with you long after the video ends. Let's keep this community growing, a place where love, memory, and meaning come together. We can't wait to hear from you.